Okay, so we are live now. It is November 29th, 2025, 421. We're a little bit behind, but that was a problem on our side. We were trying to figure out a way, since Substack for some reason doesn't like us anymore and won't let us do live. We're trying to figure out a way that we could do comments and bring them over into the chat live. But for now, we're still going to have to do it where you type in the comments. We look at our phones, manually read it, and then kind of bring it up here in conversation. But we'll continue to work on that. Again, I'm an investigator. I used to be a bomb tech and break things, so technology is sometimes a little weird for me. But once again, we're joined by Michael Young, and this time actually very excited because we have Masako Ganaha right there. So kind of the dynamic duo has been going around the world for the last few years, looking at things on the ground, the fact patterns on the ground ahead of time. And then breaking through a lot of that disinformation that tends to come out both on historical topics as well as current events. So first off, Michael and Masako, thank you very much for coming by and being patient with us this morning as we try to fix the bugs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Great. And then you guys are where right now?
We are in Taipei, Taiwan, and we just had Thanksgiving dinner with the Dalai Lama's nephew, talking about Tibet and all kinds of other things. Of course, Taiwan is, as you know, a main target for China right now. And of course, everybody in the world knows that this is the breakaway province from China, Taiwan. But we all know that that's completely false. What an epic information war, where even the experts like the CIA analyst and all those guys are like, the breakaway province of China. And it was actually for 0 days part of China ever, right? Mm-hmm. Was there like more than 1 microsecond that this was part of China?
Not all of it. No, it was the Manchu Empire, and then that was it. And then remember, the Chinese fought the Manchus to get them out. So they were overthrowing it. So yeah, it's probably one of the biggest disinformation things. Oh, and before we dive into what you guys are doing over there in Taiwan, besides having an amazing Thanksgiving dinner with the nephew of the Dalai Lama, which probably upset the CCP shadows, even probably upset them more than anything else as well. We did want to report on one more interesting disinformation stuff. So you remember that poll we put out last week that said what was the first Thanksgiving? What was the date and the place of the first Thanksgiving? You remember that one? We had,
was it Florida or was it Massachusetts?
So most people, it was 79%, like 170 responded to it. About 70% on both where we put on Substack and X replied, 1621 in Massachusetts, right? Plymouth, Massachusetts, with the Pilgrims. But guess what? Florida now gets to be able to claim it because they had theirs in September of 1546. They did a Thanksgiving dinner, a big one. In fact, they did. The Spanish did a Eucharist, which is a mass, and the translation of Eucharist is Thanksgiving. And so now, we can actually do Thanksgiving a little bit early. I'm going to put pink flamingos in the yard for decorations, and then eat all that good stuff then. So that actually works. I can do 2 Thanksgivings because one was Abraham Lincoln, wrote the proclamation to celebrate the end of the Civil War, placing it on the last Thursday of November. But to be historically correct, I need to have pink flamingos, and because St. Augustine, Florida, was the site of the very first Thanksgiving in America. So be proud, Florida. That's good.
That's interesting because a lot of people think that the first so-called Americans now who came to the United States were the Pilgrims, actually. But then, of course, my family came in 1609 and got shipwrecked and actually got to Jamestown in 1610. But we know the Spaniards were there much before that. And like St. Augustine was already up and roaring. And St. Augustine's actually the oldest city in the United States. I think that's continuously inhabited. Is that correct?
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. And so I mean, the Spanish were at it already, right? And they had been at it for quite a while before the English started to say, hey, we'd like to get in on this globalist game too, And because it started with the sort of globalism that we talk about really kind of started in about 1415 with the Portuguese hitting Ceuta in Morocco, now Morocco. But I mean, you could arbitrarily say, no, it started at this other time on camels or whatever, or horseback, I mean, globalism's always been going on. It's just, it was the Portuguese that really started making it maritime global, beyond the med type stuff. And, going to another hemisphere. And so, now it was 1415, and then they got rocking and rolling. So the Portuguese had their sort of monopoly for a while until the Spaniards was number 2, and they're like, okay, we'll do globalism 2.0, and that was Spanish. And then that's when the British and the Dutch and all that started. And actually, the Dutch ended up being the big boys for a while. They had the first reserve currency, global reserve currency was the guilder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then later, the British were like, now we can top the Dutch. And then the British had the reserve currency. And then we finally have taken that role now. And then we burned our currency to the ground like a bunch of drunken sailors.
Yep.
But anyway, do our eyes shine? Actually, it looks like from the lights.
You are very intelligent and good people. So yes, you shine brightly.
Look at the light. I mean, it looks like our eyes shine like deer in the lights because I can see it on the screen.
Really?
Does it look like that to you?
Not
It's just our screen.
No,
and our screen, it looks like our eyes are shining like a deer or an alligator. You put the light next to your head.
the red coals.
Yeah, not red. It looks like white shining because of the white light. Anyway, I just noticed that.
No, it looks good to me. Like I said, but I probably can't see because my forehead is like gleaming off the light that's over here. So it's.
I'm gonna pass this microphone to the long-haired general Masako Ganaha.
Okay, perfect. Well, I guess now that we've settled the question of Florida, let's settle the question of what are you guys there for, and what was kind of the backdrop about why you went to Taiwan. And I understand this isn't your first trip to Taiwan, but kind of give us the setup. In other words, what happened? What have you seen on this trip? And then how is this kind of progressing both historically and with the current events that's going on?
Yes. So we flew into Taiwan on November 22nd. There is a group in Japan from Fukuoka Prefecture. They come to Taiwan every year. This year is the 27th year of the visit. And they have a commemoration ceremony for the Taiwan origin Japanese soldiers who died during World War II. And they're said to be 33,000 Taiwan origin Japanese soldiers. Because at the time, Taiwan was part of Japan. So those people actually raised as Japanese and they fought as Japanese. And so the souls are here in Taiwan. And because those people are very died in young age, they don't have a family to commemorate them nowadays. So people like us who know the history come visit Taiwan and have the ceremony every year. And actually every year, November 25th, in Taichu, the middle part of Taiwan, there is a temple called I translated into English, Pao Chue Temple, and we had the in front of the hometown memorial monument, which located within the temple. We have a ceremony with the soldiers who are still alive, and this year the head of the community, which those soldiers who are alive formed after the war, his name is in Japanese Shu-san, and he's now 96 years old. So he led this commemoration ceremony. We attended it and we prayed together.
His energy was so high.
Yes, his back was like not bending because he was like this.
Yeah, it went on for hours and hours. And some of the Japanese were like, he's very strong. I mean, because other people were getting tired and this guy's 96 and he kept wanting to talk with Masako because everybody wants to talk with Masako. And he's like, you come over and talk too. And he was amazing. 96, he's total soldier still.
Wow.
That guy was great.
Shun-san was one of the Takatsuga. He was one of the Taiwan Gun soldiers. Is that correct?
Yes, he was at that 16 years old, and he applied for, the boys. He was in Navy, so he applied to become a soldier in Maizuru Navy base. Yes. But because he did not directly involved in the battlefield and he survived, and he was telling us the history, how he where he was at the end of the war. He was in, I think he said, the Bay of Maizuru, and then in Kyoto, and then he heard the Japanese emperor's announcement by radio, and he put his both knees on the ground, and then he was bowing and listening to the emperor speaking, and he was crying, and he said, Japan, he started to say Japan was defeated, and he stopped and said, no, we were not defeated, we paused the fighting. That's how he expressed. And he was telling us what his experience, and also in the end he said Japan eventually abandoned Taiwan. Why? It's so brutal. It's so brutal. He was crying, and that's what he said. So we met those people. We do this ceremony every year. So those generation, they grow up speaking Japanese. So they can speak Japanese and Taiwanese. So every year, many Japanese come here from Japan to Taiwan, and that's the day they get to speak Japanese. So they are waiting all year for this one particular day, because they can talk about the history, and they can sing Japanese songs, military song or Japanese old songs. And we had a gathering lunch ceremony also, and they are talking, singing. Do you remember the ceremony?
All 3 days they were singing Japanese songs.
Yes.
Yeah, they were singing Japanese songs from World War II and before, right? Yeah, all 3 days. And these are three. Let me tell you what, Japanese and Taiwanese people, long before sunrise, they're up and going, and then you're approaching midnight, they're finally going to bed, and then rinse and repeat. You know, it's like soldier days. It was they go at it.
Wow.
It was like 3 long days. It was amazing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Civil War veterans, the old films that you watch, the film reels of the Civil War veterans, and they're still, they have their military bearing and they've got all their energy, no matter how old they were. That's remarkable. How many of those veterans do you think are still alive that come to this reunion?
So this year, three veterans came. When I started to attend this ceremony, it was about 11 years ago. And I saw at that time there are many, maybe more, about maybe 10-ish, I should say. But every year, those people gradually decreased. And so now we saw this year 3 veterans we met. And also not only those ceremonies, but also we traveled from the south part of Taiwan to up in the north part of Taiwan, because there are many places which have some temple in Taiwan. They worship Japanese as a deity, or those temples have a very unique story regarding Japanese soldiers. So we visit those very unique places. And also, for example, the graveyard for the governor of Taiwan in the past, when Japan was ruling. So we go to those places, and then we learn about the history and the connection between Taiwan and Japan. And
they worship Japanese soldiers or is it Japanese or Japanese soldiers?
Japanese soldiers.
As deities. In fact, what did we do with that book that I was photographing and then the lady just gave to me?
We already sent back to Japan.
Oh, we sent it back to Japan. We were in this temple, and there was this really cool book.
This is the one.
Oh, that's the temple.
Flying the tiger.
Yeah, flying tigers. And and so there's this old book, and I was photographing it, and then they just gave it to me because I was photographing it. And it's how they teach their children, and they bring the children here to sing songs about Japanese to this temple. These are Taiwanese, and these are the people that China says hate Japan, but they bring their children to the temple sing Japanese songs and that sort of thing. And so the textbook, I'm sorry, we sent it back to Japan yesterday. And the textbook is all about how Japan came to rescue and fight with, well, this was Japan. I mean, where we're sitting at right now was actually Japan. So if anybody would have a claim on this place besides the indigenous people, it would actually be Japan. And this is the place that a lot of Taiwanese, I mean, a lot of Taiwanese wish Japan would take it back. Others not, some are neutral, but a lot of them strongly wish Japan would take Taiwan back.
Especially those old generations.
Hmm.
And may I explain about this temple real quick?
Oh, sure.
This temple is called we say Hiko Shogun, Chen-an Temple.
Chen-an.
Yes, and these Japanese soldiers, he during the World War II, he was a fighter jet pilot.
Not jet, but
fighter
pilot.
Sorry, and his plane was almost crashing, and he could escape, but when he looked the direction of his aircraft going, there is a Taiwan village, and he thought, oh, if I just escape and this airplane crashes, then it will kill local Taiwanese people. So what he decided is to steal this aircraft long enough that he can change the direction of the airplane so that those Taiwanese people will not be involved and die. So he did it, and then he crashed. So the local Taiwanese saw this, what's happening, like aircraft changing the direction, and then they understood what was going on. So the local people decided to worship him because he was courageous and saved local people. So now many people visit this shrine, and local people learn about the sacrifice, spirit of self-sacrifice. And so the textbook that Michael was talking about was actually written in English. They put in an anime form, like a manga form, so that children can easily understand. And every year, children learn about Hiko Shogun, this flying tiger general, and then make presentation, and they come to the temple and then pray to this deity and learn about how important it is to put public first in their spirit of self-sacrifice. So Taiwanese children is learning from the history, but Japanese people, there are many people who even don't know about this existence. And there is one more story that was unique to the Taiwan people. Should I continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I was the first outsider they let come. They only let me come because I'm with Masako.
The good group.
Yeah. I was unbelievable. I was lucky. That was quite an experience. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
That was unbelievable. I want to come next year.
So through those kind of learning process of the history, Japan and Taiwan still have a very close relationship. And many years ago, this temple decided to plan a project. This fighter, they will bring this deity back to his hometown in Japan.
Oh, yeah. We want to go there. Yeah.
Yes. So what they planned was, this is he's an individual person, not a thing, not
This
just
is a cool
wood.
story. You got to pay attention to the details, though. Yeah, pay attention to the details that Masako is saying. It's really cool.
Yes, so I will try to speak slowly. So one day they decided to bring him back to his hometown. So they decided to...
From Taiwan to Japan.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you go back to Japan, you need a flight ticket, right? So they reserved a seat for him on the airplane. But first airline company said this is not a person. So why don't you book
They
your
had it like a mannequin, right?
yeah, this. Why don't you book a seat for you, meaning the priest, and then you put this thing in a cargo, like a check-in luggage, you know? But then those temple people
We're
got
not putting a
angry.
fighter pilot in the cargo.
Yeah, they got angry. Like, we are not doing this. We are respecting him, so we are gonna get a seat for him. So they changed the airline company, which allowed them to purchase a seat for him.
Who let them do it? Was it Ava?
I think first they tried with the Japanese airline, and they did it. They said that cargo. So Taiwanese. I think I was Eva. I'm not sure, but Taiwan airline
When
allowed. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
So they actually got a seat. Actually got a seat for the old fighter pilot.
That's amazing. Now, is that Sugera from Mito in Ibaraki, Ken? Is that the same one?
Mm.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's amazing. So they're going to take that back to Mito.
Yes. And I think they have done many times, but not every year. I asked the priest, do you go back every year? And she said, no, we ask him if he wants to go back. And if he said yes, they will take him back.
Wow, that is fascinating. Yeah, so that's absolutely fascinating. That it's also interesting, the cultural differences. So EVA, or Evergreen Airways, which is the Taiwan-based airways, said, yeah, we'll get a seat for the Spirit, but Japan, which would be either All Nippon Airways or Japan Airlines, they're like, no, send them cargo. That's kind of sad to see, the kind of the change in there, but that's fascinating. It's absolutely interesting. And then they ask him, they consult with him, the Spirit, which does he want to go back home or not, to Mito? Does he have any relatives still in Mito that you know about, or?
I think when we saw photos on the walls at the temple, and then I think there are counterpart in Japan. So I'm not sure about the relatives, but the local people in Japan is working together.
Wow.
And they have a plan to build a temple in Japan too, like a counterpart temple. That's what I heard when we went to temple this time.
Wow, that is fascinating, and probably most Americans will be extremely shocked to hear that, because of the propaganda, the disinformation that we've gotten for 70 years. That's there's no way that anybody in Asia would even like the Japanese. But as Michael can tell you,
honored guest everywhere we go. Everywhere, every country we go to, you're like, oh, you're from Japan, and then I can't talk with Masako for the next hour.
Oh, that's great. But I mean, places like, we've seen it in Thailand, we saw it in Indonesia, Malaysia, they have these little pockets of areas where they had the personal one-on-one contact with the Japanese, either soldiers, sailors, or airmen. And then even with those, especially with that personal contact, then they are the ones that usually set up some type of memorial community level, for that. Indonesia's was bigger. It was the Hill of Heroes, which was a graveyard because of what they did with the PETA movement afterward. But even then, like in the Philippines and Thailand,
wait, you just glossed over that. The Hill of Heroes is like the Indonesian Arlington, and we went there. Al and I went there, and we actually hired the gate guard to be our tour guide, which is not something you could probably pull off at Arlington. And and then he took us. We didn't even ask him. He took us straight to the Japanese. The Japanese are buried in the Indonesian Arlington, up front in the place of honor with Muslims. So I mean, Muslims don't usually bury foreigners with them. And so, without us even asking, he goes, there, some of the Japanese apparently had converted to Islam, but others had not, and they were all still buried there. And he said, because they're heroes. We didn't even ask him. He was just telling us that. He's like, Japanese are heroes to Indonesia, and that's why we put them here. Right. Yeah, it's amazing. And then they have those parades every year. Everybody's wearing Japanese uniforms. Meanwhile, we're supposed to believe all of Asia hates Japan. It's just like completely false. False that Taiwan was part of China. It's absolutely, utterly, completely false. And everybody we go to wants to talk with Masako everywhere. It doesn't matter what country it's in Asia. We'll try Korea next.
That's neat. So that's awesome. So every year they've done this thing for what, 30 years, 20 years, that reunion, plus there's all
27.
that, the contact there. And then you said on Thanksgiving, you guys met the Dalai Lama's nephew. So there's even more connections. That's fascinating. What led to that meeting, and what did you guys learn in that meeting?
Well, we first met him more than a year ago, I think, and we were introduced to him by somebody interesting, and we had dinner with him and lunch with him then, and then we had lunch with him, I think, in Japan as well. So we've been in contact with him quite a lot, and so he's the Dalai Lama's nephew, so he's quite fascinating man, and he's very interesting. He's actually got a tea farm over in India. So we talked for 3 hours until the restaurant here on Thanksgiving was basically, we were the last guest. They were going to kick us out. And so, and it's funny because he looked at his watch too, and he's like, oh, after, it seems like it was only like 15 or 20 minutes, our conversation. We had so much to talk about. His wife was the speechwriter for the president of Taiwan, right? And so, it's very interesting, highly educated. Actually, when he went to school in India, because he's Tibetan, but he lives in Taiwan because of the Chinese invasion of Tibet. But he went to school in India. The Tibetans are very grateful for India for giving them a place to live and without being killed. And so he went to school in India, as did other Tibetans, and he went to a Belgian Jesuit school, which is interesting. He told many stories on that. Let Masako tell him. Actually, she tells stories better, and she has more to say.
During our conversation, I asked him, "What is the number one concern, or what are you interested in most now?" And he mentioned about Dalai Lama announcing that he is going to reborn. And if when he does that, it will be outside of Tibet. So that was very important message that I think we.
And he talked about the Panchen Lama.
Yes, because CCP is ethnically cleansing, and they are doing invading Tibet. So what they're doing, and what's interesting for me as a person who is from Okinawa, which CCP is trying to invade, is that he asked us question, do you know how CCP invaded Tibet? And his answer was that CCP claimed that the people in Tibet, they were suppressed by the government, Tibetan government. So CCP said, we will liberate the people in Tibet. That's how they invaded Tibet, using the liberation as an excuse. And right now, what CCP is doing in propaganda regarding Japan is that the people in Okinawa are not Japanese, and they are indigenous people, and they are suppressed by Japanese government. That's what their CCP is saying. So we can see the parallel logic. Next, they are going to say, we are going to liberate people in Okinawa. That's how they're going to invade Japan, I think. So,
and to be clear, Masako is from Okinawa,
and I'm
so
Japanese.
They're saying that they're saying Masako is indigenous from a kingdom, and she's being oppressed. So they're saying people like Masako are being oppressed and brutalized by American forces there, and Japan as well. And Masako's like, I'm Japanese, and they keep saying you're indigenous, and Masako's like, I'll be a bunch of Japanese. And I'm indigenous Japanese. so Japanese is indigenous.
Yes. So
all of Japan is indigenous. It's like the whole thing is indigenous. It's one big reservation of Japan.
So having conversation with the nephew of the Dalai Lama was very educational for me to learn the tactics, how CCP has been doing invasion around their neighborhood.
Right. It's the same game plan everywhere. It's the same game plan. And obviously the Chinese aren't the only ones that have done this. This is old game plan. I mean, the British did it to the Acadians, and the British did it to these guys and those guys, and we did it to these guys and those guys. Spanish did it. I mean, Romans did it. This is an old game plan. I wonder how many thousands of cultures have been uprooted and moved around. It has to be in the thousands. It has to be, because you can't swing a dead cat without another story about this happening. And it's always happening. It's not like it paused and then they started doing it again. It's like the rivers keep flowing. The rivers of ethnic rearrangements never end. I can't hear you, Al.
So Romania, right? That's like the original. Can you hear me?
Escucha bueno.
There we go. So Romania used to be called Dacia, right? The Dacians were in, right? That was Dacia. And what happened was they ticked off the Romans so much that when the Romans took it back over, they just absolutely went, full scorched earth within Dacia, changed the language, replanted it with a whole new people and called it Romania, right? That's why we still call it Romania. The people that were there, they're gone, right? Romania wanted to erase their memory, erase their history, erase everything. That's why we know nothing about the Dacians other than they got on the wrong side of Rome. Right, and they're no longer there. That's why it's Romania. So yeah, they use these tactics, and the Han are famous for moving the goalpost and moving things around with that ethnic kind of a warfare. In fact, one of the books that I think we recommended last week, if I could find it in here, was how they were reshaping that whole idea about Han. So the Han. They recognize the Chinese communists now recognize 56 Minzu or other ethnicities within CCP occupied Asia, but there's actually far more. And in the beginning, they were all about it's the Han, or Han is the elder brother to all of these other little groups that have to fall under them. But they'll absorb everything under the so-called Chinese culture, the Sinic culture, and they will absolutely co-opt it. And they worked, unfortunately, in Taiwan. It worked fairly much the similar way, because the Dutch, the first big Han group to come over, was actually invited by the Dutch. The Dutch were bringing over those merchants to help them because they were using that as a springboard up into the continents against the Manchus, right, which was the Qing Empire. It's actually the Manchu Empire. In fact, you've got a question up there. I think it was Mason Ashlar. Can you guys see it? Under what reason does the CCP make a claim to Taiwan?
Guns.
That's it.
They have guns. This is law of the jungle, straight up. But they give reasons. They say it's a breakaway. They say it was always China.
Yep. So the main interesting part, they'll make two claims. One is they try to get the Manchus. Remember, the Han, which was Sun Yat-sen, rebelled against the Manchus, which is the Qing Empire. They call it the Qing Dynasty, but it's the Qing Empire. In 1911, Sun Yat-sen led the rebellion of the Han against the Manchu, what he saw as the overlords, the foreign occupiers, and reinstituted, basically as a central group, the Han as a dominant. But there's years of civil war up until 1949, when another Han, named Mao Zedong, beat the Han, Chiang Kai-shek, and then he had to go in exile in Taiwan. But when the U.S. had administrative zones, much like we said, okay, North Korea is going to go to Russia, we're going to administer South Korea, Okinawa, and Japan, we're going to administer. And then we gave, even though Chiang Kai-shek had asked for Korea, Thailand, and Taiwan, Formosa, we only gave them Formosa. We didn't allow them to administer any other areas. And so between 1945 and 1948, they estimate approximately 1.1 million Han moved from the mainland over to Taiwan. And they were just like, they were grabbing everything. And it was pretty bad. And then in 1949, when the CCP, with massive help from the Russians and facilitation from the United States, pulled back all support for the nationalist Chinese, they went into exile on Taiwan, and suddenly even more mainland Han began to flood into Taiwan. And it created a huge culture shock between the mainlanders and the islanders, right? Between the Taiwanese essentially and the Chinese. And so much so, have you guys gone to any of 226 memorials, the February 26th memorial, while you were there?
Not this time. I remember I came about many years ago, but we should go again. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was when the nationalist Chinese, the Han Chinese that were nationalists, not communists, had to enforce this, you are Han Chinese, and kill off everybody that's like, well, culturally we're Hakalo, culturally we're Hakka, culturally I'm this, the Plains group. culturally I'm Japanese, and they put a kibosh on it, and it was a massive amount of executions and jailing to enforce you are now Kuomintang, because the legal aspect of Taiwan, it was never handed over. It was in occupation because it was
We
like
did go
Okinawa.
to we went to a museum like that, a memorial like that a year or so ago. That was where we got that book from the Canadian missionary. From the name of the book was from Far Formosa. That was that was a memorial for what Al's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from 1949 until about 1987, 88, 89, Taiwan was under martial law by the Kuomintang in exile that was holding on. They didn't have elections, they didn't have anything. And it was the son of Chiang Kai-shek that for some reason in 1987, just off the blue, he said, I'm gonna legalize the DPP party, right? Because it was only the Kuomintang party. I'm gonna legalize the DPP party, which was lobbying for independence of Taiwan. Until that point, they were still trying to go back to the mainland and take over. The Kuomintang was trying to take over from the CCP on the mainland. They still had that kind of dream. And so that was why they held on to this one China myth, because their one China was them going back and running over all of mainland China. But it was one political party that was in exile on Taiwan, trying to make Taiwan in a Han Chinese, which it wasn't. And gradually,
one China had a two-way street element we don't talk about too much, because like some of the people have said here in the last week is like, there is one China and we're China, meaning Taiwan is China, and not
so there was
subordinate China.
Yep. So there was that competing element. And so one of the big reasons, to go to Mason Ashley's question, the CCP makes multiple claims on it. And the one they've been making lately, especially after Prime Minister Sanai's comments, where she stated the obvious, which is Japan will defend Taiwan, right? So it's a thing. And under treaty, we're going to support Japan.
It has to, because to attack Taiwan is for sure they're going to go for Okinawa. Because it's not just about Taiwan. It's about the first island chain, of which Formosa, where we're at now, and Okinawa are part of that chain. Militarily, if you're going for one, you got to go for it all, or why go for any of it?
Exactly. So it's that kind of regional move that they're going to make. But the reason that they're trying to ramp it up, and this is the problem we have over here when you're watching the news and like even the Indian news, like WION and things like that. They all say breakaway republic. They all say Taiwan claims independence, as if that's not valid. But they refuse to actually admit the history of it. Again, the CCP never had Taiwan at all, nor did the Kuomintang. It had it under military occupation under America that said, you're going to administer that until we figure out where it's going to go after this thing, right? And since that time, Taiwan in 1987 stopped the martial law, became a democracy, and under all international rules is now a self-governing democracy, right? But at the same time, that's when nations started not recognizing Taiwan, even though they're following the rules for being self-governing democratic nation, because China communists would come in with massive money, as we saw even Panama, right? They corrupt officials they're going to pay that big money to, and they're going to flip their recognition over. And so Taiwan, again, has never been part of the CCP. It was never part of the Kuomintang, right? It was under military occupation by the Kuomintang, pending the results of, okay, which way are we going to assign this thing afterward? And as you said, there's more claim for Japan having it, because the modernization period of Formosa was under the Japanese from 1895 to 1945. When it modernized, it was terra nullius before that, and it was modernized under the Japanese rubric. So, there's all kind of claims in there.
Or
so
even the Dutch. The Dutch have more of a claim than the mainland Chinese, literally.
Right. Yeah.
Masako and I, we spent a lot of time with a professor in Nagasaki. Ishii is his name, and he reads old Chinese characters, and he spent a lot of time in China. He's researched this for his career, and we asked him, what claim would China have on Taiwan, and he's like, China never even mapped the west coast of Formosa. They never even mapped it at all. They really don't have any claim at all, other than they have guns. That's it. It's a gun claim. It's just a law of the jungle claim. And as you know, information war, all you have to do is persuade everybody that and look what they're doing right now. The information war against Ryukyu, against Okinawa is intense. It's ramping up to say that the people in Okinawa who are 100% Japanese. They're saying they're indigenous people and they need to be liberated. China is literally doing an information campaign right now to liberate, meaning invade Okinawa, where we have U.S. forces and where Masako's grew up and her family lives. Actually, her family created part of Okinawa because they actually reclaimed some land. It's a small piece of land, but you're probably the only Japanese family that's actually increased the size of Japan. It's pretty wild.
Well, it's true.
I'm
And
serious. They actually, her old family actually reclaimed some land. Actually, just made some land out of the sea. But that was during a period where that was during the occupation of U.S. forces in Okinawa, and they just one day said, "Well, they were poor. They didn't have any land. They just made some more." And it took a while. It's quite a story. Anyway, Masako, I'm going to be quiet because Masako's got something to show. She found this stamp store. Did I knock out the microphone? She found this stamp store, and no, it's on, and with these postage stamps. So we went to the stamp store last night, and this old man. First of all, let me tell you about the stamp store, and then she'll tell you about the stamps. So we come up to the stamp store, and he sees Masako, and he's like, she's from Japan, so she's cool. And then he realizes I'm from America. He's an old man, and he's like, oh, he started telling me about the 5 bads in English too, and he was really energetic. He's like, the 5 bads are G. He's like an animal. He's savage, tyrant, yeah, and all kinds of. He kept going on about G. He's like North Korea. He didn't even say that one's name. He's like Putin. Putin is, he starts going on about Putin, and then he says Trump. Trump is a bully. Why does Trump not know we are his ally? He treats us so badly. He treats everybody so badly. And then he's like, and then that guy in Israel, Netanyahu. And then he goes, and then, North Korea. 5. Yeah, that's it, right? So, and I said, you're like my Taiwanese brother. I mean, I'm in total agreement. All 5 points, everything he said, word for word. Anyway, he ended up giving us a discount on these stamps because I think he realized I was serious. I think he thought I was going to argue. I was about to argue and saying, you're not being hard enough. Being too kind.
You found your brother from another mother. That's awesome.
I did. I said, you're like my Taiwanese brother. And I was serious. Oh, yeah. And then he said, my brother's Jackie Chan. I think that was something else. We spent like an hour with him. Oh, go ahead. Masako found these stamps. These stamps are amazing. So the reason we were even in the stamp store is because Masako, doing her historical detective, she's like, we got to go to the stamp stores. The next thing you know, there we are.
Smart. It's very smart.
I'd like to quickly show you what Al just mentioned about this unification of China, meaning from Taiwan side. These stamps clearly shows what just Al explained.
Rant Man is right.
So,
wait, the microphone's over here. Hold on. Here. I will narrate since see the song that if you can hold it still, that there you go. The song, you got to pull it back to there you go. And now it's focused. Good. That's actually a song. They sing those Japanese songs.
Oh,
I guess it's Japanese. Well, I don't know. Could be anything. Could probably in Mandarin. I have no idea. But 1971. And
so the commemoration of the Republic of China. They're showing Sun Yat-sen there. There's Chiang Kai-shek. Oh, wow. Okay. So they've got these stamps right there for the Taiwan is the unification of China. That's their mindset. Exactly.
the next one. This is 1984.
1984. That's an auspicious year. See, there's Taiwan map.
Oh, there we go. China's unification, the 3 principles. So yeah, Sun Yat-sen had his 3 principles for modification of China, and they became the cornerstone for the Kuomintang. And that's what Chiang Kai-shek kept trying to implement during his reign, 1930s to 40s within China. Oh, wow. Yeah, there it is. So that's the unification, but it has to be the Kuomintang's unification. And that was 84. They're still doing that. Nice.
That's 1986. This one, 1986.
So this one's 1986. Look at the flags there.
Yep.
on the bottom.
The birthday. Oh, the birthday of President Chiang Kai-shek commemorative issues. Nice.
Wait till you see some of the other ones. The good ones aren't. She hasn't shown the good ones yet. Well, those are pretty good, but they're going to get better. Look at that. Taiwan at the middle. Look how Taiwan is radiating out.
Oh, I love that one. You got to post that in your profile. That's got to be your profile flag right
Actually,
there.
that's a good idea, isn't it? I put it up at the top of Twitter and other things. Yeah. Yeah,
That'd be
Masako
awesome.
found that. She's like, look at this.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
A Statue of Liberty. Where's the
wow.
Statue of Liberty? There
1943.
And look, the U.S. Statue of Liberty there.
It's amazing. Yeah, there's Britain.
Technically, the French.
And it's interesting because 1943 is the middle of the war. Notice they know that the Soviet Union's not really an ally. Despite, the centuries of shame on their stamp, they're not putting the Soviet Union, who was one of our allies at that point in 1943 during the war. That's very telling. Ooh, I like that.
And the British flag. Look at that.
It's wow. That's fascinating.
How do you reconcile the British flag there? What's up with that?
Well, maybe they realize the British are going to renounce some of their claims there, but the Soviets won't. Soviets are going to increase their claims. I think after Yalta, he pretty much got the clue. That's amazing.
But there were some other nice ones there. What was that? Oh, there was a couple of other really nice ones. Oh, there was the Flying Tigers. Oh, and then there's the UN stuff. Oh, good Lord.
Flying Tiger.
Yeah, we got a bunch of stamps. We got, yeah. Oh, yeah. Show them Flying Tiger. Thanks. Flying Tigers.
Oh, wow. Chenault and his group. Yeah, look at that. That's the 50th anniversary. Man.
What does it say on the back, Masako? Oh, and then it has text. No, it doesn't have text on the back of that. Oh, there it is on the front.
Wow. Look at that. Oh, so they issued those in 1990. Is that right? Wow. That was neat.
Is that backwards for you, Al?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, Masako's like, let's go to a stamp store. You never know what she's going to come up with next. And it's always a winner. So, how'd you come up with a stamp idea? So there we are. So from now on, we're adding stamp store to our menu in different countries.
Well, stamps are super important because that's it's like the official communication of the government, right? You can tell a lot from the art and what they're officially putting out there, especially international stamps. They're going to use internationally. It speaks more sometimes than pronouncements from their, Ministry of State. So what you put in a stamp is absolutely a great time capsule of how they see things. And, that Taiwanese, the Kuomintang flag overall of mainland China was their vision of one China and what we were kind of agreeing to in the beginning. And then later on, it got corrupted and poisoned to become the CCP needs Taiwan, which was never a thing. Because the Taiwanese people are distinct. It's a distinct culture. It's not it's not mainland. It's not mainland Han even. It's not even derivative of Han. Is its own Taiwanese culture, which is a mix over time of various elements that have been there, so including the Japanese, including the groups that were already there, and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's hilarious. And they've democratically self-organized and are a self-governing nation, unlike CCP, right? There's no elections in CCP land. So that's funny.
Taiwan spontaneously organized, so it didn't need somebody to teach it how to be Taiwan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Especially
so that was pretty good.
Not Han Chinese.
Yep. And I'm going to add this to the state. Ooh, very nice.
Look, it's the bad Roosevelt.
Oh man, look at that! Holy smokes! Let me pull myself out of this real quick. Oh, a minute. Hang on, let me get you guys. There we go. Yeah, the Cairo Declaration. Wow, look at that.
Yeah. We got to put a plug into the laptop. Running low on juice. So it's bingo on fuel.
Uh-oh. Quick, talk fast.
Yeah, here we go. Mayday.
So let me see if I've got the extra camera here. So one of the things that most people forget, especially in America, so over here, and other things like the BBC and other European nations or English language service, they always seem to carry the water for the CCP, which is just nuts. But when you look at things such as culture, let me see if I can get this in here. If I can do this, there we go. So things such as culture. This is a book I definitely recommend. It's Melissa Brown.
Look at this book.
But
Can you
she,
write that down? Do you have your or screenshot that? We can't screenshot it because it's over there. Can you send you guys? Here, Masako's writing it down. Thanks.
Okay.
We don't have good table space here because of the architecture of this place.
Oh, no worries. So, and it's interesting because it's the culture, power, and migration on changing identities. So how you can use migration to change a group's identity.
Oh,
and this one talks about the Kuomintang, the nationalist Chinese Han, moving the 1.2 million to 1.2 to 2 million Han from the mainland over a period of a couple of years, and then the martial law for about 20 years, or about 40 years actually, from 1947 to 1987 roughly, to be able to try to transform the Taiwanese culture into something that more mirrored the Han, right? But they couldn't break what was there already. And the Taiwanese, being very resilient and flexible, were able to kind of move around that. And she shows, much like Joseph Campbell does, here's your origin stories. Here's, they have matrilineal descent in some large areas versus patrilineal descent. The beliefs in certain religious systems, how they were able to do their worship and things like that. So she really does an interesting survey over time. She has a number of years that she's able to kind of revisit these groups, communities, and continue these surveys. But she shows how the government policy, during the martial law years especially, was really, really trying to force Taiwan to become Chinese, right? Even though it had a characteristic of its own. And then eventually, luckily in the 90s, the Taiwanese were able to kind of break through that and get a seat at the table, if you will, for that. And so that's another thing that Americans need to recognize. Again, Taiwan being a self-made nation. How do we do this here? Here we go. There we go. So Taiwan being that self-made nation, right? With the Japanese having that long modernization period. So Japan brought it into the modern era, and then it was administered as an occupation zone, right? Like the Americans administered West Germany, right? West Germans aren't Americans. They're very Americanized, but they're not Americans, right? So the problem was, unlike Okinawa, we gave that back to the Japanese, right? 1972, we moved Okinawa back. They're still driving the right-hand side of the road, but that doesn't make them Americans, right? It's just, that's what we did. The same thing with Taiwan. Taiwan was occupied by the Kuomintang up until, very recently, actually, when they had open elections, when the son of Chiang Kai-shek said, let's make this democracy and really prove the point. Because I think he saw the writing on the wall that the U.S. was abandoning Taiwan and was not going to help it, grab the mainland anymore. We were shifting everything to the mainland to kind of make it go up there. What he was saying was the obvious. And it's guns. It's true that CCP's claim is guns, but it's also money. There's a tremendous amount of money in China. The China mirage, as James Bradley has coined it, intoxicates a lot of Americans and Westerners with this dream of riches, $1 billion, billions of customers that are going to be, a captive market, because all I have to do is bribe one guy, one official at the top with the Communist Party, and I get whatever I want, right? I don't have to compete. I don't have to set up a lot of things. I just got to convince the official at the CCP level, hey, my product is the one getting in there. I give them a little kickback and, my products sell well. That's been this mirage forever within there. And then also the cheap markets, the slave labor, unfortunately, that is rampant within the CCP occupied Asia. Is unfortunately a very big thing that's there. Let's see what do we got here. Yeah. So this is from Blackwell. So I appreciate how much Al Michael Masako-san bring in. Realization how much influenced by information, listening to propaganda is terrifying. Yeah. So the Americans have no clue. They think that Taiwan is a breakaway republic. The fact that every news organization will say China claims the breakaway republic without going, China alleges or China falsely claims. And there's more historical, if you're looking historically, there's more historical basis for Ukraine being a part of Russia, right? Then Taiwan was never part of, the China that we're looking at, the CCP. But yet we don't even talk in terms, we never carry water for Putin's propaganda. So why in the world do we do it for Xi? And the answer is money, right? It comes down to those dollars, because China, if you say it like an NBA basketball player, or what was his name, the American actor that simply said, "Hey, I love the country of Taiwan," when one of his movies was opening there. The simple fact that he said the country of Taiwan, they were going to shut all his movies out of mainland China. And so he had to apologize.
They're total psychos. They're total like Al Qaeda types. And I'm not joking. That is not an exaggeration whatsoever. And for instance, I mean, in fact, Al Qaeda is chumps compared to CCP. I mean, like literally, they're just disorganized monkeys compared to the CCP. Look what happened on a lower level. Look what happened just a few days ago with the Japanese singer. They cut off her microphone and took her off the stage. She was just a singer,
at an anime con,
stomping their feet. Keep in mind, the Chinese Communist Party has murdered more people than anybody on planet Earth, even probably more than Pharma. Pharma's probably going to end up beating them. Big Pharma and CCP, I would say, are neck to neck.
Exactly. Yeah. What do you call them? The gold standard winners of the genocide, right? The gold medal winners, unfortunately, is the CCP. And it's been continuous since before the revolution. This little meme that's kind of going around, the Communist Party for 70 years has been just continually victimizing the people in their occupation zone, right? So the Chinese, the Han, all the 56 Minzu that are there plus under their occupation. And it never stopped. And it was that way during the revolution. In fact, I was looking over General Wiedemeyer's notes, and he was all over that he had actually talked privately with Zhou Enlai and Mao about that. He says, you're just slaughtering Chinese here. Why do you think the U.S. military, who was supporting Chiang Kai-shek at the moment, would divert our stuff to you? Because he took over after Stilwell. And Zhou Enlai was like, well, he couldn't rationalize to General Stilwell, or excuse me, General Wiedemeyer, why he couldn't articulate it, because the Chinese, he admitted it. Yeah, we kill other Chinese, but that's for the long revolution. And he was still couching that in terms of Marxism. And that's what Wiedemeyer was doing, was making him admit, you're just a Marxist and you're doing whatever Moscow tells you. And Zhou Enlai pretty much just spilled the beans. That's what it was. They're Marxists. They're European mold Marxist communists with a brutal level above, because whereas Russia somehow had to harbor at least a little bit of their manpower comes cheap and easy in the CCP occupied Asia, right? It's like an Eskimo trying to conserve snow. It doesn't care, right? There's so much of it, I can waste it, right? Or if you're talking to somebody from Saudi Arabia about conservation of sand, he doesn't care, right? You talk to a CCP guy about conservation of people, they're like, we got so many, I don't care, right? It doesn't matter to them. That what matters to them is that power, the control. And that's one reason nobody talks about Taiwan, is because Taiwan has the Kuomintang in exile, right? It has the inheritors of the revolution of the CCP. So the CCP want to pretend that they're part of the three prong that Sun Yat-sen talked about, the three principles that modernize China.
Before you leave that other slide, can you go back? Because I'll forget something.
Let me go back.
Something funny. Oh, the other one.
Here you go. Point.
Oh, you see the guys with the computer screens?
Yeah.
There's our 50 Cent army, I guess. Now I just had an insight. Maybe that's how they practice English, is leaving comments in our comment section.
That's what I'm hoping.
Those are the guys on my Twitter. And yours too, and yours. That's the guys. They're practicing their English by lying. So
you remember it was funny when we used to do the comfort women stuff, right? We would suddenly get these guys come in and just go hot and heavy with the whole comfort women thing, and we would transition it over to, these are the dragon women that are getting stolen up, for the bachelor villages and all that kind of stuff. And it was funny because they would do. You would say, look, tell your handler to give you better talking points, right? Your supervisor's not setting you up for success in this debate. And they would go offline.
I want a supervisor here.
Yeah, exactly. And I say that, that's all I'll tell them. It was like going over to.
I'm gonna start using that with comments. I'm gonna be like, give me a supervisor here.
Exactly. Your handler is not setting you up for success. He's giving you terrible talking points. Go back and it's
50 Cent ain't doing it. I need a 75-cent man.
I need a $1.50. Give me a $1.50 guy in here, right?
I need a $1.50 dude here.
But it's true, and they have a tremendous, and that's the thing, they have a tremendous, the largest program of foreign influence in the history of the world. Arguably, the CCP is in the top 3, right? And it's the largest that we've ever faced in our history adversarially. I mean, it's just massive. because they have the people, they have the technology, they have the reach, they have millions within the United States. They have 30 million all overseas. There's 30 million overseas Chinese that under the Kwaiwu and United Front Work Program are beholden to Chinese communist control and influence. So they must do the bidding of the CCP, or their families or they personally will suffer. So they are useful tools for the CCP. And there's 30 million overseas, approximately 3 to 6 million, depending on who you talk to, here within the United States. So they're embedded within here, and they can go online, and they know how to do these talking points, and they've got their VPN Tor tunnels to talk home and all this sort of thing. So there's a lot of that propaganda, and their primary function, the survival of the CCP, is absolutely 100% on a lie, and they have to propagate that lie to propagate their existence. Whereas the U.S., you tell me that Thanksgiving happened in Florida. Okay. I'm going to put pink flamingos in my yard. All right, we're great. I'm going to go to Catholic Mass. Okay. There we go. Instead of dressing up like a pilgrim, I'm going to put a metal conquistador in my head, when I eat turkey. Okay. Well, there it is. Right. It's not going to change who I feel about myself. The CCP, however, can't do that. They're not intellectually honest enough about principles, because it's all built on this fantasy lie. And when that starts to crumble, they hit this epistemological moment. So they spend a tremendous amount of money and effort and lies to get that going. And they've bought, I don't know how many Quislings on the American, British, and European side to carry water for that lie. And so when you expose it, they lose their stuff. But there's some pretty big names over in America that have absolutely carried a lie for generations about the CCP and ignored the fact. We go 80 years ago or 100 years ago and say, oh, back in those days, this country's so bad because they did this. Okay, what about today, right? I mean, how many Chinese are dying today? 80 million plus have died within a country that's never brought one of those perpetrators of genocide to justice. And yet we're going to harp about something, 80 years ago that happened in World War II. We start to look like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. It's like we're outside the fantasy lane. We need to work on the here and now and what's happening, and potentially save it from moving out, right? We can't save mainland Asia, but you can sure as hell start to defend Taiwan. You can sure as hell say, let's support, the Japanese saying that, and stop carrying water for the CCP. The CCP's militaristic aggression, they want to grab Taiwan as well as the Senkakus and Okinawa. And, oh, by the way, probably split some deal with Russia to get Hokkaido in that area up to the Russians, because they're starting to use that information war against the Ainu as well. They're trying to set them up for something. I think every other day there's a new YouTube video about the genocide and the horrible conditions that the Japanese did against the Ainu. I mean, their information preparation of the battlefield is insane, but yet we miss all of the genocides that the Chinese have done against themselves, and the actual histories that, the CCP did against themselves, especially this guy. And it's never been called into account, and they continue to do it this day. To me, that's cowardice.
Reading that book now. We didn't get that book yet. The Mao book that you just held up, that last one.
Oh
yeah.
May I say something?
Oh yeah, please.
Al, what you just explained about the necessity for CCP to lie in order to exist is very interesting. And in Japan, we say, when we express how liar CCP is, we say they lie like they breathe, like as they breathe.
Like they breathe?
Literally, they have to lie in order to breathe.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
very
it's
true.
It's fiat history, basically. They just keep printing more and more, and now they have basically lie inflation. It debases everything about their culture too. When a culture lies to preserve itself, it debases itself, and eventually it's going to collapse, because it's going to collapse it doesn't respect itself, and nobody else. Eventually the lies will collapse. And they will collapse catastrophically.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you see how much money and effort they spend on the Kwaiwu program. And again, for the people out there, I would highly recommend that book, The Kwaiwu, written by a former Kwaiwu handler. They spend tremendous amounts. The largest government program they have it controls the United Front. It's part of it. But to control the minds, thoughts, and actions of overseas college students, overseas people that own, the cigarette shop, the tobacco tobega, the grocery store, just that level of you can't even come in from that mindset. Like, you can't learn a different history about the CCP. You have to do the CCP, even when you're living in Liechtenstein or, down in Panama, that level of control of the narrative. Why they set up all these Confucius Institutes and everything else is to try to baselines everybody's fantasy about what the CCP is. And that alone should tell you that their house is built tremendously of sand, right? It's pretty bad. And that's the weakness but the problem that I've got with the United States and with the free world is the cost is just the truth. All you have to do is just study and do the truth about the CCP. And that's $1 million right there, right? All I got to do is just say the truth. Don't carry the water for the CCP. And that's better than, 1,000 missiles right now, right? Hit them with the truth and hit their
thing. We don't have to lie. We just have to be like,
we got
there's
the truth.
The body. You're
facts,
covered in
right.
blood. It's like the glove fits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we got a question here from Watts Kilug. It says the Chinese elite's part of a caste system like India. I'm not sure if it's the same as India. I know the Han are considered higher. So when you look at their Politburo structure, you'll notice that only the Han have been up in the premier or the core, basically a dictator seat, like Mao, Zhou Enlai, Xi Jinping, that sort of thing. But I don't think it's as hierarchic. It's just under the 56 Minzu, which are their ethnics that the Communist Party recognizes as part of China, and that's the Zhuanghe Min, which is the Chinese citizens. The Han are the superior. They call them the elder brother.
They're not,
it's funny
the Han
because
are not the top class. There's one class that's higher than Han, and that's called the Yan class. Yan class. And so actually, I am an emperor in exile, but I'm coming back, brother. Xi, I'm coming for you. The Yan class shall return.
Well, hey, they made up the stuff. Why not? I mean, there were Nestorian Christians all the way, and Gnostics and Nestorians in Genghis Khan's area. Now, remember, Genghis Khan took over all of Han China. He beat the crap out of them, right? It became the Yuan Empire, which is the Mongolian Empire. So there could be a Yan in there, right? So you're the great grandson of Genghis Khan. You're coming back, right? Get those
Actually,
who
Genghis
nation.
Khan, everybody actually knows Genghis Khan was actually Genghis Yan.
See,
everybody
there you
knows that. That's what they used to call me when I was in the army, when I would play chess, actually. And I'd be like, actually, that's my great grandfather.
And the sad part is there's more historical basis to what we just made up than the entire CCP history. That's the sad part. Oh, there's your first follower right there. All hail Emperor Yan. We already have the cult going. There we go. And that is
hello,
very
Colonel
sad.
Black Wolf.
He's promoting the cult members. I'm going to get sued. You're promoting a cult. No. But to show you some of the hierarchy, real quick, I'm going to do this one. See if I can do the extra camera here. So let's see. Whoops. Again, terrible with this stuff. Let's try this. Nope.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Here we go. There we go. All right. So this is another good book. This is actually from a number of Chinese scholars that came out of the CCP method, right? So Huayin Li, and it's basically the history of China, right? The historiography. So he examines the history of communist historians, right? And the beauty of it is that he'll show in here that the one that Mao actually promoted, Mao was competing with Chiang Kai-shek to create the history of China. Like, how do we see ourselves? And there was a number of guys. Fan was the big one. And Fan, his whole purpose, it even says scholarship must serve politics. Right, so they don't have scholarships. They don't have, like the Wissenschaft, movement, or the positive movement. We're looking at facts and that sort of thing. No, what they do is they say politics first, and scholarship must follow it. So Fan came in there and began to create narratives in history that, for whatever reason, the Westerners picked up and started carrying water for them. But it's literal. You can follow historiography and see where that comes in, including what we talked about, I think, 2 weeks ago, which is the
wait. Can you rewind this? So you said politics first and scholarship follows. I mean, that's like saying straight up. They're saying it in clear terms, right?
Yep. It's a scholarship.
What do you want will make the history you need.
Exactly. The exact quote is scholarship must serve politics.
Right.
Right there, right? So, and that was Mao's guy Fan. And that's why Fan became pretty much famous and wrote all of the textbooks within the communist side of China, then eventually China once they took over. And he attacked it. And what they did was they set up the image of the beginning of the downfall of China was the Opium War. So that Opium War comes in large part their victimization and all that. But it wasn't even them. Remember, the Han were colluding in many cases with the British to move that opium up because they thought they were overthrowing the Manchus. What he did was he recast the whole thing, but he still said it was a Manchu-Han conflict. So instead of highlighting the Han, who were facilitating the British because they were working against the Manchu, right, who the Westerners just see as Chinese, but the Chinese don't see it that way. Even the communists looked at it with a Manchu-Han conflict. He says the history of China is collaborators and resistors, right? And so he said that the Manchu are now the collaborators. They were giving in to the Westerners and everything. And the Han were the only ones that were fighting back against the Opium War. He completely flips history on its head, but he has to go through and he rewrites. And they show in here how he rewrites history completely. But the Westerners never called him out on it because it became official Chinese history. And they would just read Fan and they go, okay, well, that's good. Right? They never doubled down on it. The rigor that we have in the West, for example, against the Soviet historians, we never brought that to bear against the Chinese. For whatever reason, we kind of, swallowed hook, line, and sinker. And it goes into there about how to create the nation and your identity, including the identity of the Han, by history writing, right? So you create this, and then they have the history of the elder brother. And it's very interesting they use that term, big brother, because it reminds me of Orwell. Remember George Orwell?
Yeah.
Big brother. So they literally put that in there about the Han to the other 54 Minzu are big brother, and you have to follow the Han. So the Han are like the Aryans, and everybody else has to follow down. And they rewrite history so that the Han are now the heroes, and everybody else was kind of the collaborators, especially those darn Manchus, right? Which is insane. And that was the new Marxist theory. But it's funny because even though Fan was a Marxist historian, he threw away the economics about everything and put it within racial terms, which is more Nazi or National Socialism than it is, pure Marxism. So you see this hybridization out there that the Han really kind of merged, the CCP merges racial theory, like supremacy theory from the Nazis, in with communism, which, the Nazis did that way anyway. So you kind of see that, but he goes through that. It's actually really, really good to look at how they create this image. And so when you attack this, when you say, look, okay, let's show me the receipts, show me where you got this from, how this actually works in practice, and you call them out on it, they wipe out. The best one, there's a YouTube video out there about it, was the Chinese ambassador in Britain, and they had a town hall meeting, and the Chinese ambassador, there was a guy from Tibet, and the Chinese ambassador was up on stage, and then the moderator was there, and the Tibetan guy goes, how do you justify occupying my country and what you've done to this country, what you've done to Tibet? This is horrible. And it was just insane. This guy was a character out of a Bond villain, from a movie. He was up on stage, the ambassador, and he kind of looks down and sneers at the Tibetan refugee. And he says, you have to accept it. The Yuan dynasty has owned yours from time immemorial. It's like the Yuan dynasty were the ones that your own historians say you're fighting against. The empire that you overthrew is the one you claimed owned Tibet forever. And he only owned it for a couple hundred years. And then Tibet was independent on its own. So the history breaks down. The best thing Americans can do, the $1 million missile that you've got, is facts. The $1 million missile that everyone has is just the truth about Taiwan. It's an independent nation with its own unique history that was never part of the mainland, right? It was part of the Manchus for a very brief period of time during the Dutch era, but the Manchus are gone. The Han destroyed the Manchus. The Han fought the Manchus, right? And they're gone. And they've wiped them out culturally. There's no more Manchus left except overseas. I think there's actually a guy in Japan that's trying to bring back the Manchu language because his family fled to Japan after the war, right? So they've wiped them out. We need to have the same standards that we apply to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, every other empire that we look at in our studies, and apply that same to Chinese BS that they're putting out there, hold them accountable and hold our people accountable. So when a press reporter sits there and goes, well, what about the breakaway Republic of Taiwan? Call them out on it, and you're really good at that. That's one of the things you do, is you call them out on the BS and just don't listen to them. I mean, if it's, as you said, there's people in the freaking CIA that are sitting there saying the breakaway Republic and how the reunification, the one China policy, they don't know what they're talking about. Like literally.
Masako and I were talking about that yesterday in strategy talk about how to address this. When we always face this, the breakaway Republic, and the way that we handle it is just stop right then. Don't even proceed with the conversation until we work that part out. Show me the money. I want to see the facts. Because until you can show the facts, you've either got your history wrong, which was going to put into question anything else that you're talking about on this subject until you go back and do your homework. Because there's nothing more to talk about if you're getting that foundation wrong. The whole foundation is wrong, that this is a breakaway republic. Now, keep in mind, this is very important as well. China is going to come for Taiwan, period. Full stop. That's a done deal, right? They're going to come for Okinawa. That's obvious, right? So on that level, the history lies make no difference whatsoever, right? China is coming for the meat, right? But for the support base, for the others around the world who may come to the aid of Taiwan and Japan, that's where the history is important, because it's not important for China. They've already made up their mind what they're going to do. So how to address that one is Japan needs hydrogen bombs and hypersonic missiles and lots of submarines and that sort of thing. They need to have an overseas intelligence network. They need to get very serious about it. They need counterintelligence laws. They need to do mass deportations and strengthen up the body of Japan. And because this is it. It's game on. It's a state of war already. And so the Chinese, keep in mind, Xi is Maoist. He's a hardcore Maoist, like the nephew of the Dalai Lama was saying to us over dinner the other night. You know, he knew Xi's father, actually. And he said he was much more sympathetic, actually, to the Tibetans, Xi's father. But Xi's a hardcore Maoist. He's in the cult. And cults do what cults do. And the cult of the Maoist is coming for this place. And that's what cults do. Come hell or high water, they're coming for this place, and they're coming for Okinawa. And keep in mind, as you know, Al, I was over in China quite a lot, and I went to a lot of their museums as well. I went to Nanjing and Museum and all these sorts of different museums. They're building a deep reservoir China is building a deep reservoir of hatred against Japan. The only reason you do that is to add anger to that. Then you've got, then it's game on, then it's war, right? And because you need to have your own population energized to go do the genocide, because China clearly intends to genocide the resistance here in Taiwan and Japan. It's obvious, right? Japan has to do mass deportations. It's absolutely vital.
Exactly. That's exactly right. They're generating that hate, that kind of psychotic, view that they're doing. In fact, you shared something earlier today, back in March or May, there was a couple of Chinese that hit even the Japanese school kids. There was 10 elementary schools crossing. They did a hit and run, kind of laughed and kept going. That level of just dehumanizing is horrible.
When did they hit the children?
I think it was March or May, because they've arrested the two. It's already gone through the prosecution. So they've confirmed they are Chinese nationals that were there and what they're doing. This is another comparison that's very important for Americans to see. So some of the things that Americans do, we have this need for whatever reason. We've mythologized World War II. We've made it a religion, which drives me nuts. But we've created this myth that, and you hear it in the news media, like when Prime Minister Sinai, I keep getting her last name wrong, the new prime minister, Japanese prime minister, made the obvious statements that the U.S. has made. In fact, Biden made it like 4 or 5 times, that if Taiwan is hit or attacked, that Japan will come to its aid, and the U.S. will have to back up Japan based on treaty obligations. And China went just absolutely nuts. The CCP just went absolutely nuts. And the U.S. will always go, Japan's return to militarism, right? They always use that. But China never stopped militarism, right? They've been militarism forever. And this is an example since 1945, right? So the column on the right, and we'll post this when we post this up later, but the column on the right is everything that Japan has done within, since 1945, right? In other words, you have to reach 70, 80 years back to find anything on this guy. What are you talking about? But China, you're looking at now, right? So there's been no direct combat since World War II has been Japan. There's no military bases in contested territories, no violations of international border agreements, no violations of international sovereignty agreements, no mass atrocities against civilians. And then they abided by the San Francisco Peace Treaty with regards to Taiwan, which was Japan. So that's Japan's record since 1945, right? But China, on the left, they've had definitely direct military interventions in conflicts since World War II. And there's a certain colonel, which my opinion about that, brain dead person. But he's saying that China has never invaded anybody else. Yeah, of course they have.
Okay,
They
you're talking about Douglas McGregor, and I know
yeah.
you're watching, Doug, because we talk all the time, like daily. And
that's
and I don't know why you're carrying the water for China.
CCP.
This is war. This is straight up hardcore war. We don't have time for pussyfooting around.
He's either corrupt or an idiot. And I've heard,
Susie Wiles, by the way, Susie Wiles, Trump's master. She was a representative for China as well.
Yeah. See, it's the money. I mean, people will give up all of their common sense for money, and that's the problem. Anybody that has a stock portfolio that has any profit from the CCP occupied areas, they don't need to be in government. You need to be out, right? You can be maybe a postman somewhere, but as far as making decisions, no, because you're corrupted, right? You're talking with your pocketbook rather than your brain cells. But the CCP absolutely has invaded other areas. About 80% of the Chinese landmass right now is occupied territories of some other nation that was there. They violated border agreements. India, Bhutan, Nepal, Tibet. They went to Vietnam. They were in the Philippines. They're doing contesting areas there. They built that Great Wall of Sand, as Admiral Harry Harrison has coined it. They were working those. Everybody's losing their mind because on Yonaguni, I think now Japan's going to put some defensive missiles there, right? And so everybody's like, oh my gosh, they're ratcheting it up. But they were completely silent when Japan was building China was building those militarized islands along the ADIS line. Remember that? They were extending out that 9-dash line to try to push the level out.
No, it's the Air Defense Identification Zone.
Mm-hmm. So they were literally pushing that out. They violated UNCLOS, the United Nations Law of the Ocean, right? They literally said, forget it. We're violating all kinds of international treaties. And they continued to do it, right? Like we said before, they're the gold medal standard winners of the mass genocides, right? Nobody holds a candle to these guys, right? Just nobody. And they've continually done that again and again and again against their own people in peacetime. It's not like it's wartime and they could justify it some way or the other. No, they're just like, nah. And they get rid of them, right? And then misinterpretation of Taiwan status, continually violating the San Francisco Peace Treaty. And you'll see that in the news articles now because people don't understand what the San Francisco Peace Treaty was about that governs the status of Taiwan. They're moving that a lot. So that's a big one there that people don't even understand. And so we'll post that up in the site. The other thing we'll do is this one. This is really what you're looking at, right? And for those that are in the historical detective agencies, we've got a link in there about maps where you can actually move the slider and it'll show you, how things move in kingdoms and all that sort of thing. Look at China over time and you see that most of that area that's occupied, right? These are areas they have forcefully gone in, occupied, and then eradicated the culture that were there, created a genocide. Like I said, the Manchu language is gone. They're trying to revive it now, but it was a huge people with a tremendous history that ruled China from the 1600s to 1911. It was the Yuan Empire, the Qing Empire, and it's gone. They wiped it out, completely gone. So, that's the reality of what we're facing against. And they play the long game, and they're very good at it. And they have a lot of money that we've given them that they're using to kind of launder back and corrupt people that sit in radio stations and batter your kernel thing around. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. But you guys are there in the front lines, and like you said, they will go for Taiwan. The question is, what's that going to look like? And can we do against it? One more thing, I'd say get Japan. And this is kind of going off historical and more into my technical side. They just did a test the other day where they're using drones and it sends out pings to make it look like different fighter jets. So I would definitely imagine that some of this would be utilized in a Taiwan game where they're going to send out a whole bunch of drones, but it's going to show up on your air traffic control looking like an Allied or Japanese fighter jet. The only difference is going to be when you look at it, the characteristics might be different, but you can make it look on the electronic signature like an Allied fighter jet moving through. So I would be looking at that. So Japan needs to have this capability worked in there for AI to distinguish between, okay, that's probably a, that's a red herring running around there when this thing goes kinetic. So definitely Japan, that's one advantage that they can have is probably that. So we'll post that link up there. Again, that's more of a modern capability, not so much historical, but false flags and all kind of false information is always part of big history.
Masako has something important here.
I just want to mention one news that I saw yesterday. It says it's a news in Taiwan. Taiwan's main opposition Kuomintang has introduced amendments to Taiwan's nationality law, which would allow Chinese spouses to run for office without having to give up their Chinese status. The bill has now passed its first reading in the legislature. I hear that, for example, I hear that in Taiwan, I don't know which source it is, but when we talked with the nephew of Dalai Lama, he mentioned that 50% of Taiwanese people, they are not willing to fight. So, even in this critical, intense situation now, there are not only Japanese people, many are not realizing what's going on in their country or what CCP is threat is about, but also those kind of peace dementia phenomenon is also happening in Taiwan too.
Right.
So this news was, I can't believe this, but it's the product or fruit of CCP's propaganda.
So basically, a Chinese citizen can become an elected member in Taiwan is what they're trying to pass. Basically, like an Israeli citizen, our prime enemy, actually trying to become a congressman, that sort of thing. Dual citizenship. That's what they're talking about. Yeah, it's complete infiltration.
So China become you. That's the tactic. China become you.
Wow. And so that would be them voting on it, right? So you have those dual alliances. In fact, not even dual. It's a nuts because they're literally the group that's trying to take you over. They're saying they can vote in the elections. You're ceding your sovereignty to the mainland CCP. That's insane. And you said it was for relatives. They have to be relatives of people that are citizens of Taiwan. Is that correct?
Chinese spouses.
I would look for something similar that's being enacted here in the U.S. Spouses of, if you marry in, someone gets voting rights based on Marriage Act. I think they did that in a couple places. So yeah, again, it shows the immigration is a tool, is a weapon. It's a weapon of war, and the CCP knows how to use it because you could literally at that point, you could vote your way out of your own sovereignty, your own independence, your own freedom, and basically your own life. That's insane. Yeah. And the Kuomintang, and that also shows the Kuomintang party, the same thing we heard from a couple of guys, that has now shifted over to the left. It's now this radical left party versus, an independent Taiwan party. That's why the DPP and other groups have to be there. Did you guys ever link up with Freddie Lim while you were there? The one that was initially Chthonic and then
we have not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because he was the first one way back doing that sunflower movement where the Kuomintang first tried that. The businesses, you didn't need a business license, you didn't have to do any type of registration. You're just going to be in, all the rights of Taiwanese or to the mainland. And it was him that led the student movement that took over parliament for I think 2 weeks or a week, and blocked it, right? Blocked the votes and finally got enough awareness that they had to stop it. And then later on, he ended up getting in parliament himself. And I'm not sure where he's at now, but I think he would be a good guy to talk to because he was really, really hardcore on that. And he's a native Taiwanese, right? He was the one that made Tagakskao and all that. He had music videos. He had a band called Chthonic, and he had music videos about, the Taiwanese that were in the Japanese military. And those were pretty good. So he highlighted that, and that was 10, 15 years ago. So I'd be very curious on that. And you said, so just to make sure I heard that right, that was the Kuomintang introduced that bill?
Yes.
Wow. Well, there we go. There's evidence the Kuomintang kind of got corrupted. They got marched from within. So be interesting to how that plays out. That kind of sucks.
This was on X. This was in Taiwan Plus News. So it's at Taiwan Plus News. That's where this thing is that Masako found. Taiwan's main opposition, Kuomintang, has introduced amendments to Taiwan's nationality law, which would allow Chinese spouses to run for office without having to give up their Chinese status. The bill has now passed the first reading in the legislature. So that's straight up taking over the cockpit right there. And the Kurds are trying to do similar in Japan, getting office and that sort of thing. It's normal. I mean, it's happening in the United States, of course. We're letting our own great system be destroyed by itself. But they just use our system.
And that reminds me, before we take off, because I know you guys are super busy, but give us a snapshot what's going on in Japan with regard to that. And have you seen parallels in Taiwan? I know it's tough because of the CCP, the mainland are Chinese, the Han are coming over. But in Japan, it was a big push for Kurds, and then it was Indians getting visas coming over. What's kind of the status now, as far as you've seen, Masako? Has there been enough pushback that's kind of slowing down, or is it not even slowing down? What's your read on that right now?
I don't see it slowing down. because there was a huge pushback from the Japanese people against the hometown project by African people. JICA, it's like a Japanese version of USAID, JICA. They were trying to have 4 cities within Japan designate as a hometown for Africans. But this project was canceled. But they just changed the name, and they are still aiding people to come into Japan. So it's not, they just changed the names.
So the new Japanese prime minister has not done anything to stop those foreign invaders coming inside Japan. Japan's still paying for that. Is that correct?
One of her cabinet, she is spoken. Her name is Onoda. She is speaking strongly against those the people from coming overseas, but they're only talking about those illegal people, not the government's whole policy for immigration policy to stop. So I don't see them being hardcore.
One of the excuses used, which they use a lot over here, is that the unemployment numbers, like we need people to work. But in Japan, you probably have the best skill set of any workers anywhere in the planet. I mean, these are good workers that have been moved out of Panasonic, Toshiba. You've got tremendous skill sets. What is the excuse that you have to bring these people in? What in the world is it? I mean, is the unemployment level in Japan suddenly zero? What's going on that's driving this thing?
Common excuse is that we don't have enough birth rate and we don't have enough workers. Many elderlies, the population of elderlies are getting bigger, despite the younger generation is shrinking. So that's the common excuse we hear. And for example, the black cat, it's a Kuroneko Yamato. That's one of the major not the post office, but mailing service company. They laid off many Japanese, but recently they announced that they hired 5,000 Vietnamese for delivery. And now those services are considering the standard service of mailing staff is to drop off at the in front of your house. Meaning, if you are not at home, they will just leave the goods at your door. That would be the standard. And if we wanted to hand delivery, we have to pay extra. That's the argument that they are having right now. So they say we don't have enough people to deliver, and if you are not at home, it's gonna put more burden on the delivery people. So those kind of arguments are simultaneously going on.
But isn't the Japan unemployment still very high among the native Japanese?
I don't have the exact unemployment number, but what people who say that we don't need foreigners to work for us, but what we can do is there are many, do you know the term hikikomori? Like the people who have mental issue and they are not working or they cannot get out of home. They are secluded from the outside. We need to work on those Japanese people's mental health so that we have more Japanese people who can work.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. I've never known Kurds to be good home healthcare workers, so I'm kind of confused by that. We need more people in nursing homes, so let's bring in Kurds. I would think Filipinos would be first because they've had this massive nursing program, and they do very well in Japan, from what I've heard traditionally. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Exactly.
Well, sorry to hear that. Anything else that you guys wanted to cover, kind of before we break free here?
I'm good to go. We should do this more often.
Sounds good. And by the way, you clean up well. I had to put a vest on today just to match your sports blazer there. So I had to do the tie and the vest because I'm like, Michael's coming out here with a suit. I'm like, oh man.
Long-haired general in action.
Well, she's got it cleaned up pretty good. So that's neat. Now, where are you guys headed to from here? I understand you're going somewhere else after Taiwan.
Netherlands.
Ooh, what's if you can say, no OPSEC out, but if you can say, what are you looking for over there?
Oh, I'll tell you when we get there.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, be safe. Have a good journey, and then glad you like Thanksgiving. Remember, next year, hopefully in Florida, we'll go back to the source of the first Thanksgiving there in Florida. So pink flamingos and everything.
Yeah, pink flamingos. Flamingos taste sort of like eagles.
I thought you were going to say alligator, but okay.
In the end, I would like to mention to our audience, please visit Taiwan for your vacation or any trip. Taiwan is very nice country, very safe. You can walk in the middle of night, women by yourself. It's very safe and people are very nice. Even the taxi people, taxi man, we are trying to ask for a ride. He said he cannot do it. So he got out of the taxi car and he got another taxi for us. Meaning Taiwanese people are very nice people. And what they need from us is that we just say the truth. Taiwan is an independent country. That's the most powerful gift we can give to Taiwan people. So like Al said, cost is the truth. I think that's the word for today. So cost is the truth. Let's visit Taiwan and enjoy good Taiwan food and make many Taiwanese friends.
She doesn't even get paid for this. She just,
No, I don't.
You get discounted
like the tourist bureau, but it's legitimate too. People used to say that I was like the tourist bureau for Thailand. I'm like, no, I just love Thailand and I love Taiwan and I love Japan. I mean, this is like the triangle. You're the same way, Al. All three of us love, because Masako has been to Thailand too. We all three love all three countries.
Yep. No, that's true. That's excellent. And again, the cost is just the truth. Just stop saying the lies, start telling the truth. That's pretty good. And then the bonus is you actually go to Taiwan, meet the people, look at the rich, deep culture, the actual history of it. It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, that'd be great to go back again. So, who loves it?
Taiwan,
Joe.
You'll love Taiwan. You'll be like, how would there be any improvement in the world to give this the genocidal, maniacal Maoist? Nothing. It's a step backwards, a giant step backwards.
That's very true. Well, hopefully we'll see what happens in the future, and it'll remain safe and independent and free. But it's going to be tough because, as you said, it's got that pork chop around its neck, along with a lot of other countries. So there we go. Oh, there we go. Shout it from the rooftops. Taiwan is a country. There you go. Easy.
I will, boom, Colonel Black Wolf. We're on it.
Oh, that's right. That's your follower. She's the one that said like Emperor Yan back there. I forgot about that. That's your first follower. There we go. All right. Well, you two take care. Thanks again for waking up this morning and coming on the show. We definitely appreciate it. And then I'm just going to sign off here. And then actually I'll do some book reviews with the folks out there if they're looking for more information. But again, thank you both very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Be safe. Okay, so real quick in the time left, some of the books that we would recommend for looking at getting a varied picture about Asian history, because the U.S. is terrible at Asian history for a number of reasons. But among them lately has been a tremendous push by the industry that will pay you to be able to carry the water for the CCP. And there's a lot of people like that. So some of the books that I would actually recommend on this are, we'll go ahead and start off with specifically to Taiwan, to kind of understand the history of Taiwan. Now, it does have a little bit of bias because it doesn't show, as Masako and Mike talked about in the beginning of this thing, it doesn't show the Japanese, that there were actually very good communication and cohesion between a lot of the Taiwanese and the Japanese, depending on the group that was around there. It was stronger or lesser depending on the group you're with, or the First Nation of Taiwan tribe that you were with. But it's actually very good to show how it was shaped to be more like mainland China after the war, right? And that's very important to kind of see, and how they were resilient enough to kind of push back from that. So that's a good one. That's Melissa J. Brown, Is Taiwan Chinese? And it's mostly surveys with the survivors of the people that were still alive in the late 80s, early 90s, up through the 2000s that existed there. But it's very good because it shows that a lot of people think that culture is something that's defined by race or ethnicity. It's not. It's defined by your personal experience, your language, your food, your interactions, your social network around you as you grew up. Culture is malleable. It changes. It can go across borders, as we see even now. There's internet cultures that exist geographically independent of one another. So when you're looking at defining that cultural map for your link analysis or things like that, if you're in the investigative field, that's important to understand that people can operate in a culture, mental culture, outside of something that you would assume that they have based upon their interactions growing up, their family history, and then their mental map, their history, their socialization history, which may be independent of what you would think. So it's actually a pretty good book on that. Again, Is Taiwan Chinese by Melissa J. Brown. The other one for the historiography of the communist historians and why they kind of craft and they believe that history or scholarship should follow politics is within here. It's Huiyan Li, and it's Reinventing Modern China, Imagination and Authenticity in Chinese Historical Writings. And mostly he focuses on the early 20th century as the competition between the Kuomintang and the CCP for the narrative of what it is, how the CCP weaponized history to primarily go against the claims of primacy by Chiang Kai-shek. It was, reducing Chiang Kai-shek's star. And it was very effective because their propaganda was swallowed whole by a lot of Americans. And they still carry water today, like some brain dead colonel out there that's carrying water for them. But anyway, for example, this is Theodore White and Annalee Jacoby. This was a 1940s book, Thunder Out of China, and it propagates. These weren't the only ones. There were many Americans that went over there that had severe communist leanings, and they would carry this kind of a myth about what the Chinese history was and how the CCP was doing it. Now you think, okay, well, that's back then. We're just trying to make sure that the CCP was fighting the Japanese and all this sort of thing. Well, no, this was carried forward, and even authors like James Bradley, who is not by any means a communist sympathizer, still believes some of the propaganda that was developed during that time, that the CCP was the only ones fighting the Japanese and that they were the liberators of China from World War II. In fact, the parades that we had earlier this year on the anniversary of the end of the war, as they put it, the end of the war against fascism, and yet they're fascism on steroids, as the CCP is still used. And this is actually mentioned by name with these authors in another fascinating book, which I would also recommend. Not only if you're a war studies person, but specifically for China. And it's Wiedemeyer Reports. Now, this general was probably one of the unsung heroes of World War II because he was part of the group that took all of the War Plan Orange and all of the contingency plans that Army War Plan College had been looking at in the 30s and said, now we're going to put those in the rainbows, right? So there's Rainbow 1 through 5, which is the strategic and operational and industrial whole of society approaches to how we're going to go into World War II, well before World War II. And he was very honest about it, right? So probably one of the best planning generals that we ever had was General Wiedemeyer. And so this is a really good book. And the reason I find it fascinating in this respect with regard to Taiwan, the CCP, the Kuomintang, is because he was the one that took over after Stilwell was essentially moved out. He got along with, get this a little bit better here. He got along with Chiang Kai-shek. He was able to efficiently use the Kuomintang army. And he had plans such as Operation Carbonado, which talks about using Patton in pretty much northeast China, the land going over. But he has the insights into China, and he's not afraid to talk about it. He actually mentions the book Thunder Out of China, and he mentions it in the terms of, yes, it's just propaganda. It's crap, because he was literally there, as in command of all this, and he knows it. And he goes into specifically calling out the CCP, and we will do the same thing. The Chinese never fought the Japanese. The CCP never fought the Japanese. All the heavy lifting, all the combat was done by the Kuomintang, who, of course, the CCP attacked even before it was already over. Before the war was finished, the CCP was already attacking not just the Kuomintang, but also American troops. So people forget that as well, that the CCP was attacking anybody within there. So this is an excellent book to kind of showcase that, and it's an inside view, especially his conversation with Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong about the nature of it, because he saw the brutality that the Communist Party did against the Chinese people. And yes, the Kuomintang, as he noticed, was very brutal in their mechanisms, but it was more of a medieval brutality because they were inefficient. but the communists were specifically to keep all the people down. They were there to destroy the people, to institute what they believed Marxism to be. And he finally got Zhou Enlai to admit as such, which counteracted all the people that go, oh no, they're not really communists. When he had Zhou Enlai so off put that he went back to his training and began to go, this is what Lenin says, this is what Marx says, and all of that. So that was very interesting. In fact, I'll probably just go ahead and read the passage here. So in discussing communism with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai at my home in Chongqing, I asked them why they and their followers could not, in their own initiative and without adopting a foreign ideology, accomplish the excellent objectives embodied in the Sanmin Chuyi of Sun Yat-sen. Now, remember the three principles that Masako had on those stamps earlier? That's the three principles of Sun Yat-sen in the Kuomintang. Zhou Enlai replied that the Chinese liberators could not be separated from the socialist state, nor could they operate without the aid of international proletariat. I then asked this General Wiedemeyer, does this mean that you must obtain aid from the Soviet Union? And he replied categorically that the Chinese communists must accept the existence of the Soviet Union, as well as the proletariat in the United States, Great Britain, and other countries of the world. Otherwise, we cannot win a victory over the bourgeois dictatorship. They weren't looking at beating the Japanese. They were fighting a battle of communism. Mao Zedong, who had been listening carefully to our conversation, translated for him by a female interpreter who has accompanied them, interrupted. Chinese revolution is an integral part of the world revolution against imperialism, feudalism, and capitalism, he added. We are definitely committed to the struggle for political and economic revolution in China so that the people will have a new system of politics, economy, and culture. Not only must we eliminate political oppression and economic exploitation, but also we want to help our people who are so ignorant and backwards to become educated, civilized, and progressive. In other words, a new culture for all our people. I then recalled the period 1927 to 37 in China when Chiang Kai-shek and his government were striving to accomplish similar objectives. Neither Zhou Enlai nor Mao Zedong would agree that forward steps had been made. In fact, they emphasized the poverty, squalor, corruption, and maladministration which they maintained were directly attributed to the Kuomintang. I then commented that many of the objectives of Marxism, when read or even expressed in ardent communist, would seem humanitarian and constructive, but uniformly after the communists came into power, these worthy objectives proved to be a delusion and a snare. The so-called proletariat were denied freedom of speech and opportunity to determine how and by whom they would be governed, commensurate with their work, and even freedom to worship their God. Zhou Enlai was very anxious to interrupt, but I continued. The methods employed by the communists to obtain controlling limit intimidations, murder, and enslavement have in every instance been the hallmark of communist acquisitions and maintenance of power. Zhou Enlai was obviously aroused by my remarks because he burst forth in Chinese. Then realizing that I didn't understand, he returned rather haltingly to English, trying to find the correct words to refute my statements. He emphasized that the power of the reactionary forces in the world was so great that the common people were compelled to resort to any means necessary in order to accomplish the overthrow of their deadly enemies. He then quoted Lenin, the proletariat must continue to struggle against capitalism until it is destroyed. Right. And I had heard many times they were not true Marxists, but were simply agrarian reformers interested in the welfare of the Chinese people. So that was one of the myths that we put out there, that they're not really there. And then he even talks about how he had descended to communist areas about famine that was created by Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, 11 tons of medical supplies to alleviate the situation. And he saw firsthand how that was kiboshed by the communists. Right. So another good book to be able to look at the behind the scenes and from a person that's not a fellow traveler, right? And he also shows about the abandonment of the U.S. of the Kuomintang, which eventually led to the CCP taking over. It wasn't a revolution from below. It wasn't the people uprising, all the other stuff, which unfortunately James Bradley has continued to carry water, not intentionally, I think, but a good book to see the actual square of that. Another good one from the Chinese sources, the Kuomintang. I got this one on Taiwan. This is a pretty good one. General Ho Yanqing from his library, so it was quite nice. But he goes into the actual battles, the casualty statistics, and all of that. And so you'll see the Battle of China as it really is, not as it's kind of propagated now for kind of this war porn that kind of goes out there and kind of atrocity porn. The other one that I wanted to mention, which is very good, this is an excellent book. Jun Chang and John Halliday. Remember, she was communist. She came to America and had an epistemological moment and found moral courage. She went back, interviewed the people within the CCP because she was part of that network, and got a lot of the truth in there. Wrote this phenomenal book, which I would highly recommend. As you notice, the massive amounts of notes. I've checked out most that I could, and a lot of them do actually, they link up, right? They link with a lot of source documents that never get kind of put into modern war history because it kind of takes away these bookends that Americans need. We need the Asian Pacific theater, the Asian theater, to match the morality of the Western theater. It's not going to happen, right? It's just not there. No matter how much we push it, it's different, right? Two different wars that kind of bled over into one another. And this demonstrates that. It also demonstrates the CCP, how very much they were pushed, supported by the Soviets. But it wasn't a one-sided relationship. Mao was sneaky enough to get what he wanted from Khrushchev. He tricked Khrushchev into giving him the atomic bomb. Fascinating story in there, especially for folks that want to look at the history of nuclear nonproliferation, which is kind of a subgenre, but it's very important. Another good book to be able to go into. It's very thick, over like 600, 700 pages here. Let's see what it is. Yeah, 727 with notes. But an excellent book that kind of puts to rest and gives you the intellectual ammunition. Of course, validate everything, right? Assume nothing, believe no one, confirm everything. But once you've gone through here, confirm it with the source documents in there and what they presented as evidence. If you decide that this narrative is the one that makes most sense based upon the evidence, then this gives you a tremendous amount of answers in there. That'll help you go forward to tell the truth, as Masako said, which is the best weapon because it's free. Oh, we got a question here. Let's see. Thanks for answering my question. I know very little about the CCP or history of China. It has been said that fish swim, birds fly, and a man sins, and Liang and deception is all part of it. Yes. So, yeah, we'll get into that. That's actually a good one. I'm gonna do this one, then I'm gonna go to that quote. That's actually very good. The other one to kind of show you in the politics and warlord period, the emergence of the Kuomintang was one of many different groups within the what we call China. Now, if you'll notice, right, this is not Tibet. This isn't all the other areas. Mongolia at this time, by the way, was a puppet state of the Soviet Union, right? And then, as everyone knows, in 1929, the Soviet Union also invaded Manchuria. But this was the Manchus, right, which are the Jurchens and the Manchus. They were this area. So this was a foreign area, a different group. The Manchus, the Han, are down here, but they had spread out ethnically. But there were many other. The Minzu are all over the place here. And it divided up after 1911. They tried a republic with Yuan Shikai, who was a Manchu general, and he took over because Sun Yat-sen just didn't have enough Wasta to be able to work it, and it fragmented in kind of these different groups. And there was a northern faction, an Anhui faction, a Chile faction, a Fengqing faction, which is Manchus, and all sorts of other factions competing within here. This was like Syria when it breaks apart, or for example, the Balkanization, right? So if you look at Yugoslavia, everybody thinks it's one nation. Well, it broke apart. Austro-Hungary was a number of different nations. The Ottomans were a number of different nations. Even within this area, within what we call the homeland, so to speak, of China, there's a numerous different ethnicities and nations and groups and identities that form over time. And the actual mixing of that, it's not this monolith that's all powerful. It actually changes and adopts. It was Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists that didn't go to these regional concerns and was able to create a broad coalition and get foreign support and advisors that allowed him to kind of gain the most territory in that multiple warlord competition. But there wasn't a groundswell. There was never an election. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, well, that was who the Americans were going to support. And also, by the way, the Soviets, and oh, by the way, the British. So there's a lot of competing things in China. It really was kind of Wild West. And there wasn't this single narrative that they try to push out now as kind of a morality play. And this is an excellent book because it shows, for example, in each of the cliques in that period of time called the warlord faction, like the Anhui faction, who was connected to who by either blood, like kinsman, father, son, the brothers, and guys that worked in, for example, Iraq will recognize this because these are your link analysis for, okay, the tribal groups within Iraq. So you think it was the Iraqi army. Okay, they were Republican Guard. Yeah, but this guy was the brother of this other guy over here. And that's kind of how you actually have to track things because it's not just politics. A lot of times it's going to be sociometrics. It's going to be the family linkages or business linkages, or sometimes they went to the same class at the Whampoa Military Academy. For example, Thailand, the police and the army can work across lines if they were cohorts in the same class. And so looking at that, you begin to get a better picture of what was actually going on within the history of China. And it's not monolithic at all. It mirrors in some ways even more so than the fragmentation of the Ottoman Empire or what the Austro-Hungarian Empire was at its zenith. So let's go to that, exit that. We'll go to this. There we go. Now we had a good one here. This is actually pretty good. There's also an interesting part within the culture. So within the West, we have most people have grown up with lying is a what's considered a sin, right? Or it's a moral failing if you lie, right? If you bear false witness against your neighbor. In some countries in the world, to include the Han, the CCP especially, lying is good, right? There's no It doesn't matter if you lie. Just don't lie to the state if the state asks you something. But other than that, it doesn't matter, right? If you get what you get, you have it. Lying is not. It's nothing. So you sometimes will not even get what we call a nonverbal response, paraverbal or nonverbal response when you're talking and you're interviewing them or you're eliciting information. They won't give a tell. Right? It's very difficult, very, very subtle because there's nothing. Right. So in other words, it's actually a feature, not a bug in the system for them to lie. And their entire history is that lie, and they perpetuate it forward. And that's seen as a benefit. They don't have a guilt complex somewhere in them that's going, wow, this is all BS. I'm lying about this. I feel weird about it. No, they just continue to go forward with it because they think if you say it enough times and you sing about it and you wave a banner with it, it becomes true somehow magically. Right. So that's a very good one about it, that a man's sins and lying and deception is all part of it. And for the CCP, they have instituted a culture of fabrication and lies that are perpetuated. The problem comes in, and I expect it, right? It's a snake is going to be a snake. I don't get upset at a snake because he acts like it. That's a snake. What I get upset over is a lot of the Americans carry water for those snakes, right? By the bucket loads. And they continue to perpetuate those myths and those lies to our detriment. It's setting us up on the information preparation of the battlefield to be at a disadvantage, right? It's so easy to just tell the truth, and it's fun. It's fascinating, right? You're history detectives, right? Go in there and let's get those source documents. Look deep. And Taiwan's another great one. I wish I'd asked him more about that. But when I went to Taiwan, for example, a couple of good things. You don't even have to go to Taiwan. You can do the Hoover Institution used to translate a lot. But this one is actually, there's a great museum in Taiwan and Taipei, Taiwan, and it's the National Museum. They were able to rescue a lot of the materials from mainland and bring it over. So this is basically a Kuomintang museum, but it has most of the history of the mainland there. Remarkable artifacts. They saved it from the Cultural Revolution because remember, Mao and his Cultural Revolution destroyed Chinese history, right? And then they could rebuild it in their image and claim it, but they destroyed it, right? They literally destroyed Confucius' tomb, and then they created the Confucius Institute after they destroyed his tomb. Right, that should tell you everything you need to know. But this is fascinating. It's a great book of source documents. You can get it from their group, and it is the history of the Kuomintang in the diplomatic documents. So you can see how they wrote the documents and how they were able to kind of move that forward in their quest for kind of gaining more of their sovereignty, especially at the end of World War I, when the Treaty of Versailles was coming about, how they were able to try to move those things around. It's absolutely fascinating. The languages, if you're a student of the chop marks, they used to call them, or the hanko in Japanese, to be able to look that forward, it's absolutely just a brilliant book on multiple levels. So in some cases, stamps will tell you a lot. The diplomatic documents will also tell you a tremendous amount for that. Let me see if I can get that here. Here we go. It's a century of resilient tradition exhibition of the Republic of China's diplomatic archives. And I have to show this one off. So this is the bookmark, and it's actually one of the from the museum itself. But they have all these little replicas, so it's a replica of the seals that they have, but it's a bookmark that goes through there. So just really good quality. And then they have a restaurant just outside of there where you can go and eat historical food. It's just it's absolutely wonderful. But it's fascinating to see how they saw their place within the world and how they believe that they had to negotiate with those powers outside of their realm in order to maintain this idea. And as the same time, they built this idea of what is China. So there's a lot of things going on. And then especially in the exile period, now they're in the government in exile on Taiwan, how they try to continue that forward. And then you kind of watch it slip away as the United States abandons an ally. So that's another excellent book to be able to go. But I think you can only get it if you go to Taiwan. But the ones you can get here is the final part, and then we'll go ahead and sign off here. This is Milton Shea, and it's the Kuomintang Selected Historical Documents. It's translated from the Kuomintang's own words. So this is Sun Yat-sen's own words. Another thing we didn't talk about, but it's actually very important, is the mental inheritor of the revolution. It's very important for the CCP internal control mechanisms to pretend that they are the inheritors to Sun Yat-sen's revolution. Unfortunately, Quislings and collaborators like Jackie Chan made that movie in 1911, which famously says that they are inheritors to it. They're not. They weren't inheritors to any of the things that the Kuomintang did during World War II. So take all of that with a massive grain of salt. But looking at the own language of Sun Yat-sen in the formation of the Kuomintang is absolutely fascinating to see how they saw the Han against the foreign occupier, which was the Manchus, which is the Qing Empire. but going through, and then they had to change it. So once they actually got their successful revolution, then they have to go back and go, oh, wait a minute, now what do we do? Now they realize that in order to kind of run the mainland, you have to kind of incorporate all these other Minzu into the Han. So it wasn't going to be Han, but how do they do that? How do they maintain their supremacy within this national system if you have to incorporate all these other ethnic groups within there? So that's kind of how they have to work this through. And you see the back and forth when it's the unified front with the communists. You can definitely see why they went against it, because the communists were wiping out Sun Yat-sen and instituting what they saw as red colonialism, right? It was very much Russian colonialism within control of China. That's the other part that people forget, is that the Soviets would use, they're just extending the Tsarist program under other means like communism, where you think it's going to be fair, but how the control mechanisms from the Russians were using both the Kuomintang and the CCP as the mechanism of Russian revolution. They called it red colonialism, and they saw it as just another colonial mechanism. And it was Chiang Kai-shek that broke free of that and started going after the CCP. And he broke as much ties as he could with the Soviet Union. He needed to be able to maintain that. And you see the struggle as they go through here and how they could do that, because he couldn't make an absolutely clean break, but he did as much as he could. And then how do you reform the principles, the three principles of Sun Yat-sen under actual conditions, and how he worked that through. So it's a fascinating look at kind of the evolution of the ideas and ideations of the Kuomintang, all the way up until they were in exile on Taiwan, and how they had to adapt to Taiwan. So it's absolutely a fascinating look at that, to understand what the history of post-war Taiwan was, to understand that it did come from the Kuomintang, and what was the Kuomintang, what was the government in exile on Taiwan that had been pushed out by the CCP, greatly aided by the Soviet Union. So there we go. So any questions on that, feel free to add them over. Whoops. Got another question here. How do you have time to read all these books and annotate them? Well, it's it's delicious caffeine tea. So this there's actually Formosa gunpowder green tea, and I got really hooked on it actually in Taiwan. Wasn't it that there was a different place? There's a mountain resort that you can go to in Taiwan. Oh, I wish I remember the name. It looks like Miyazaki's Spirited Away, that onsen. Some people actually thought it was from that, but it's not, as far as I know. But Miyazaki did go there, and it's remarkable because they have, the 10,000-year-old dragon eggs, and they make all this wonderful mountain food. Just fascinating to go to. But anyway, they had this Formosan green tea that they grow up in that altitude area, because it's similar in soil to Shizuoka. And I think it was the Shizuoka during the Japanese administration of Taiwan that they began to do that. They began to find areas in Taiwan that were similar to Shizuoka, which is the best green tea in Japan. Probably Japanese will hate me for it, but that's what it is. But they made Formosa gunpowder, and it's a very delicious green tea that keeps me awake, and so I can continue to read. So, and I have a really good support network. So I own my own private investigation agency now. I'm semi-retired, as much as people will let me. But that's how we can do that. We read it, and then we use history as kind of case studies to be able to go through and do that in between, real world cases that we tend to work. And as I found, history will tell you a lot about it. In some cases, it tells you a lot more about what's going on than just contemporary. You have to go into history to get the picture about why some of the players are operating the way that they are. And once you get a clear picture of history, a lot of things just start lining up. Your predictive modeling is a lot better with an accurate view of history. And again, it updates based on facts. You don't have certain documents translated. They eventually get translated, so you have to update and adjust your hypothesis. But on the whole, once you kind of let go of your ego and you say, okay, this is what history is. This is the pattern. These are the players. This is the dynamic. Organizational structure dictates outcome almost every time. This is the organizational structure. Once you've got that, now you've got that predictive modeling, that predictive analysis that you can go forward and go, I think it's going to turn out this way. And it usually does. And so history is a huge part of that. So it's not just a hobby, but I also were able to use that. What? Yes. That's right. A human being. That's right. So someone else that knew Al Sr., my father, who was far smarter than I was, he came up with our organizational structure. And that basically was because, the real thing is you study human nature. Humans are social creatures, and human nature hasn't changed at least in 4,000 to 6,000 years at a minimum. We know that, right? Humans have not changed in 4,000 to 6,000 years. We're the same creature. We have fancy toys, but biological structures, organizational structures are also biological as well as social, as well as national, economic, etc. That biological structure has not changed within 4,000 to 6,000 years. We will respond to the stimuli in the same way that we always have, right? And we ignore that history at our peril. And there's a lot of history about what human beings do under certain conditions. And so that is absolutely critical for being able to get these predictive analysis. So, human nature doesn't change. So history, doesn't repeat, but human nature does. So when you understand human nature really at the baseline by studying history, you're going to get that predictive model. So excellent there, Black Wolf. Man, I'm going to ask Mike to promote you from colonel to general there, because you're going to lead this thing better than me. All righty. Well, if there's nothing else going on, those are the recommendations. We'll probably draw it up in a recommended reading list for that. And then again, just study it, analyze it on your own, verify it with the source documents. Don't get emotional about it. And then once you've seen it, okay, and if those facts bear fruit, then perfect. The best thing you can do to support both the United States, the free world, and Taiwan is just say the obvious, right? And if you support that, saying the truth doesn't cost anything, but it's great. And it's kind of fun calling out some of these people that think they're really smart, and they're out there going, oh, the breakaway Republic of Taiwan. No, it's not happening. Taiwan is a country. It's a self-governing country under any matrix. And if they double down on it, that's not a person you want to associate with, right? Because they're a fascist, they're a Nazi, they're a communist. They're not worth your time. And at that point, they've automatically identified themselves as an enemy, and they like genocides. Get as far away from them as you possibly can. So with that, hopefully, 2 hours already. Okay, so we will sign off for now. Feel free. This one was on YouTube because Substack no longer allows us to go live, probably because of this content. Who knows? But our main pages are on Substack. We're over at History DA at Substack, the Historical Detective Agency. We're going to post archives of this over there. That's where we interact. If you have any questions, we're able to do that. Time depending, we can do some research, everything from local historical research up to international. Most time periods, if we don't know it, we usually have a network that's able to look into those for you, that we're able to look at. If you want real world cases, we also have a real world private investigation firm with a large network that can be able to handle those as well. But Historical Detective Agency is really for the historical questions that we have and other people have that we bring to it. So recommend going to Substack, stay on there. That'll give you all the latest news that's going on there. Also, Michael Yana is also on Substack, and Masako Ganaha also has a pretty viable Substack. So that's where we kind of hang out. Recommend you go there. Any questions, feel free to post it on this, and we'll check it on YouTube. We'll check it on Odyssey, and eventually we'll post this over on Substack as a recording, and we'll work it from there. Thank you very much for listening, and hope everybody have a safe holiday weekend, depending where you are in the world. And we will see you next week about this time for another Historical Detective Agency Detective Hangout.